Something is wrong with our hearts if I'll use your death to try to make it my rise. There's only one death that you and I should use. And that's because he got up. Every other death leaves people weeping and in pain. And we ought to pray. 15 on today. Luke chapter 15. Verse 11. I must tell you, honestly, that I feel a lot of things this morning. And one of the reasons why I do is because I'm so aware that there's so much going on, and I'm just not so sure if enough people are aware of what's going on around us daily. That impacts our lives. It involves us. But we might not feel it. It might seem insignificant, unimportant. But it matters. I was sitting down last night after the death of Whitney Houston. I was just looking at all the different people signifying, speaking, saying all kind of stuff. And you know, there's something, when God starts dealing with you about weakness and brokenness, you don't see anybody die and you start coming up with all their negatives. You know, one of the things that I caution everybody in this house, when a person dies, they leave family. And every word you speak against them, their family has to hear it. See, the good thing that I know about God is that she died in a room by herself. Wasn't none of us there. And when all the reports come back and all the people say all the things they say, there's something, when I heard it, it broke my heart a little bit more. Because what if, for real, this woman who was struggling for years with problems, that we don't know what was the onset for these problems. 2010, she comes out with this album and she goes on a tour, and it's like a comeback tour. Many of you in this room have never had to try to do a comeback. But could you imagine trying to come back as Whitney Houston? For those of you who are a little bit older and remember Whitney in her heyday, how could you come back as Whitney Houston? Especially if you got additional weakness in your life. And when you hear people all over the world saying your voice don't sound like it used to sound, could it possibly make you internalize and reconnect with your pain all over again? And in 2011, she stops touring and checks herself in for help. See, I don't stand here today to determine where Whitney is. But I think it's a shame that people who call themselves Christian can't feel her mother's pain. Can't feel that little girl that she left's pain. We can just say whatever and do whatever. But what if Whitney was your sister? What if Whitney was your mother? Your aunt? The only way that the church is going to rise up and be important is when every person matters. As long as everybody don't matter, we don't have the heart of Jesus. Jesus didn't die for the saints. The Bible said he died for the ungodly. The Bible said while we were yet sinners, Christ died. I'm watching people on Twitter make all kinds of jokes. They put more YouTube clips up in the last 12 hours about one woman than they said has ever been put up in YouTube history. Some of them are people trying to get discovered through her death. Something is wrong with our hearts if I'll use your death to try to make it my rise. There's only one death that you and I should use. And that's because he got up. Every other death leaves people weeping and in pain. And we ought to pray. We ought to pray. Tuesday night I mentioned one of her songs. And that song is a part of this message today. Because I really believe that people of God need to get this. I'm not pro-Whitney or anti-Whitney. I'm pro-Jesus. But I feel it's so sorrowful if people in this church don't know. I hope we all get it. I hope we've all been through enough hell in our personal lives and in our families that we get it. That we say, Lord, bless that family. Take them through. I pray we get it. Because what is it, saints? Ultimately, is weakness and brokenness. Ultimately, that's what it is. The song that the praise team sang said, you've given me grace for my brokenness. We sang that song today. Would to God that we all could see that. This passage in Luke 15, I'm going to deal with it for a little while. There's a lot of verses to cover it. It's 11 through 32. And I'm not going to even try to cover all of those verses today. But there's something in there that is so important for us to see. Because we're going to find ourselves in this passage. Every one of us. Now, I'm going to be honest with you today because my heart is heavy. It's not heavy because I'm going through something. It's heavy because I feel the burden of hurting people who don't know where to turn. The church is not standing out enough that they know exactly where their answer is. Would to God that nobody sits next to you this week and can't feel that this person has an answer. What are we chasing? What are we pursuing that we miss great opportunities to just be a blessing? Verse number 11. A certain man had 2 sons. The younger said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth me, and he divided unto them his living. Let's make sure we understand what the boy got. Because he's the youngest son, the law of the elder son would come into play. So this boy got 1/3 of everything his father had. He gave it to him while he was still living. The elder son would have got double portion, so he would have got 2/3 of everything the father had. So this boy is given 1/3 of all his father has. 13 says, and not many days after the younger son gathered all together, took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous living. Everybody say he left his father. Verse 14, and when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. Psalm 23 says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not what? This is a verse, Psalm 23 is a verse that deals with connectivity, connection. When we start wanting, it's because we have wandered. Saints, I want you to see something. I know when we look at this passage, you're going to see this boy leave, but I want you to recognize that this is not the first time he left. People who leave many times. For real, we leave and go and come and go all the time. Whenever we think we can do it ourselves, whenever we think we got it going on ourselves, whenever we're looking for love out there somewhere, we all leave the Father. Every time we're looking for an answer somewhere, we leave the Father. Every time we're hurt, frustrated, and we do not bring that before God, we typically leave the Father. The Bible said, verse 15, he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. Now, I don't have all the time today. I'm going to get into it over the next two services, but Jews didn't touch swine. They were forbidden. But verse 16 said, he would have fain filled his belly with the husk that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. This boy was so desperate. Everybody say desperate. Listen, saints, this is why my heart hurts. Because I see desperate people in suits. Desperate people with beautiful dresses, outfits. Desperate people at the beauty salon, the nail salon, the barber shop. They're desperate. You don't know what they'll do to be happy. The Bible said he would have eaten the pig's food. That's how empty he was. You could be so empty. I know I ain't got no witnesses in here. You know, I'm glad this is being recorded. But you could be so empty that you would do unimaginable things to be filled. If I could just fill this void. I know. Ain't no limits to what I do to be happy. Maybe that's not you. Maybe there's only one person in this building today who is just going berserk away from the Father, trying to fill voids in your life. Down within, no, you're not happy. Verse 16, no man gave unto him. Verse 17, you got verse 17, say at the beginning with me if you would please. And when he came to himself. Say it one more time. And when he came to himself. How many times have you come to yourself and said, what am I doing? How many times have you come to yourself and say, God can do something for me? How many times have we come to ourselves and said, I can get better than this? He came to himself, but this time his attitude was better because he didn't talk about his sonship. He said, how many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger. He said, my dad is so good. Not only does he take care of the sons, the servants aren't even hungry. Even the people who would be called servants are living better than me right now. Look at his heart, verse 19. I'm no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy... No, I'm sorry. He says, verse 18, I will rise and go to my father. Make sure you get this. He's not going home. Too many people talk about going home. The issue is not going home. It's not leaving home. It's leaving the Father. I'm going to my Father. You didn't leave home. You left the Father. Sometimes you can be right at the house, but you ain't with the Father. He said, I've sinned against heaven, and before thee, I'm no more worthy to be called thy son. Just make me one of your hired servants. This isn't manipulation. This is the results of a heart that's really been touched. But you know why it's been touched? Because he didn't hit the bottom. See, we're not going to come to ourselves until we finally hit a bottom somewhere and realize that I'm not who people think I am.